You don't know me yet, but you will. The words echoed in my mind as I stood at the threshold of the master suite, the heavy door brushing against my fingertips. The golden chandelier above shimmered, throwing fractured light across the polished marble floor, and I could feel my heart thudding in a rhythm that matched the faint tick of the grandfather clock in the corner. Emily Carter, 24, bride for barely a few hours, dainty in her ivory gown that felt both elegant and suffocating at the same time. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind 1,000 times, yet nothing could prepare me for the stillness that filled the room. A faint hum of the city drifted through the tall windows, a soft reminder of the life outside that now felt impossibly distant. Vincent Romano, 65, looming in his tailored black suit, stood near the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back, dark eyes glinting with the weight of secrets I was only beginning to sense. I took a tentative step forward, the silk of my dress whispering against the marble, and the soft click of my heels seemed louder than it should have, carrying through the vast room. His gaze didn't falter, it held me in place like gravity, drawing me closer to truths I wasn't yet ready to face. A silver locket at my throat, cool against my skin, caught his attention, a subtle shift in the sharp lines of his face as recognition flickered behind those calculating eyes. I swallowed, throat dry, the weight of expectation pressing on me from every angle, and managed to whisper, "Good evening." His lips pressed into a line, unreadable, yet the aura of authority and unspoken history pressed down, making the air between us almost tangible. I moved closer, curious and cautious, noting the faint scent of his cologne, rich with cedar and something darker, almost magnetic, and the room seemed to contract with every step I took. My hand brushed against the edge of the velvet armchair, grounding me, a reminder that I was still myself even in this overwhelming presence. The flicker of candlelight danced across the walls, throwing shadows that mimicked the tension in the space, and I realized that every detail mattered: the subtle creak of the floorboards, the soft rustle of fabric, the barely perceptible hum of the city outside. He finally spoke, voice low, controlled, "Emily, you carry more than you realize." The words sent a shiver through me, a mixture of anticipation and fear, and I felt the pulse of something ancient and powerful in the room, a current I hadn't expected to encounter on my first night as his wife. I clutched the locket instinctively, tracing its smooth surface, and the past, present, and some unseen future seemed to converge, leaving me suspended in a moment that was both terrifying and impossible to look away from, knowing that what I was about to discover could change everything between us. The soft click of the door behind me barely registered as I stepped further into the suite, the weight of Vincent Romano's presence pressing around me like an invisible wall. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and leather, mingling with the subtle, almost imperceptible scent of cedar from his cologne, a fragrance that lingered in the air long after he moved. I could feel the temperature shift as he tilted his head slightly, eyes narrowing, studying the way I held myself, the way my fingers lingered on the edge of the windowsill, tracing the contours as though seeking an anchor to the world outside. Each movement I made seemed magnified, each breath I drew noticeable in the silence that stretched between us. I wanted to ask a question, anything to break the tension, but the words lodged in my throat, heavy and hesitant. His gaze never wavered, and in that stillness, I began to sense the depth of the history behind those dark eyes, something unseen yet profoundly impactful. My thoughts wandered to the silver locket that rested against my chest, the cool metal sending shivers through me every time I touched it, a small but potent reminder of a past I had barely understood and a connection I was only beginning to feel. I took a step closer to the fireplace, the polished marble reflecting the soft glow of the candles, and for a moment, I allowed myself to breathe, letting the quiet fill the space while my mind raced to anticipate what might come next. Vincent shifted slightly, the movement subtle yet commanding, and the air between us thickened with unspoken words, possibilities, and the fragile tension of two worlds colliding in that very room. I could sense his attention sharpening, every detail I offered unintentionally observed, analyzed, catalogued. My heart beat faster, a steady thrum that echoed in my ears, as I felt the gravity of the room pull me toward truths I was not yet ready to face. I reached for the armchair, fingers grazing the fabric, grounding myself in something tangible, and then I noticed the faint pattern of light across the floor from the chandelier, fractured into sharp lines that seemed to mirror the intricate network of secrets Vincent carried. I could not help but wonder about the years behind those eyes, the experiences, the decisions, the hidden corners of a life so meticulously maintained. I swallowed, forcing my lips into a small, controlled smile, and as I did, he finally spoke, voice low, deliberate, yet carrying an edge of something intimate and urgent. "Emily, every choice you have made has led you here." His words settled over me like a weight, heavy yet strangely clarifying, compelling me to acknowledge the inevitability of this moment, the convergence of paths that neither of us could have fully foreseen. I drew a slow breath, letting it out gently, the sound barely above a whisper, as I met his gaze fully for the first time, seeing the man behind the authority, the history, the secrets. And in that instant, I understood that the night was far from over, that the discoveries and revelations waiting within these walls would shape not just the hours ahead, but the very fabric of what our lives were about to become. The soft hum of the city below barely reached the suite, yet every sound felt magnified in the quiet tension that enveloped the room. I moved closer to the wide windows, my fingers tracing the cool glass as the city lights reflected in scattered prisms across the floor. Vincent stood behind me, a shadow of authority, his presence filling the space in a way that was impossible to ignore. The locket at my chest seemed to grow heavier with each heartbeat, a silent weight reminding me of the connection I had only just begun to comprehend. I turned slightly, enough to catch the glint of recognition in his eyes as he followed every subtle movement I made. The soft fabric of my dress whispered against the marble floor with each step, a sound that seemed to draw his attention even more, the way he tilted his head slightly, studying me with an intensity that made the air thick and almost tangible. I could feel the pull of something unspoken, a force of history and secrecy that lingered behind those dark eyes, and it made my chest tighten in anticipation. The flicker of the chandelier above cast fractured light across the room, highlighting the sharp edges of his jaw and the subtle lines that told stories of experience and careful control. I pressed my palm against the window, grounding myself, and let my gaze drift over the cityscape, trying to steady the rush of thoughts and emotions swirling inside me. Vincent moved closer, each step deliberate, measured, and yet filled with a quiet power that I could sense in every fiber of my being. He stopped just a few feet behind me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his presence, yet careful, precise, his hands never reaching, the tension between us palpable. I swallowed, throat tight, and whispered a question that had been forming in my mind: what does this mean for us? His voice was calm, measured, each word deliberate, carrying a weight that pressed against my senses. It means that nothing is as it seems, Emily. Every moment has led you here, every choice, every path. I could feel my pulse quicken, the city light shimmering in the reflection of my eyes as I processed his words, realizing that this night was only the beginning of revelations that would shape not just ours, but the very foundation of everything I thought I knew. The locket warmed under my fingers, and a memory surfaced, faint yet persistent, of a time I had barely understood, a connection to a past that now seemed intertwined with the man behind me. I turned slowly, facing him, trying to read the shadowed expression on his face, searching for some clue, some indication of what was hidden beneath the controlled exterior. He met my gaze steadily, unwavering, as if seeing right through the carefully constructed layers I had built around myself. I felt the weight of history, the pull of secrets unspoken, and the subtle promise in the tilt of his head that there was more to discover, more to understand, yet not all at once. The room seemed to contract around us, the chandeliers casting light and shadow that danced across the marble, reflecting the delicate balance of curiosity, apprehension, and the quiet anticipation of what was to come. I took a deep breath, steadying my racing heart, feeling the gravity of the moment, knowing that every instinct, every sense, was heightened, every glance and movement carrying meaning beyond the surface. Vincent extended a hand, just enough to gesture without touching, guiding, suggesting, without imposing, and in that gesture, I sensed the intricate dance of revelation and control that had defined this night, the first of many steps toward understanding the full measure of what awaited us, the unspoken histories that would unfold gradually, revealing truths, binding paths, and leaving me suspended between fear and fascination, curiosity and caution, ready to take the first step into the labyrinth of secrets that surrounded Vincent Romano and the life that had brought me to his side. The soft glow from the chandelier shifted across the room as I stepped toward the writing desk, fingers brushing lightly over the smooth wood, feeling the subtle grain beneath my fingertips. Vincent remained near the fireplace, a silent sentinel, his presence commanding the room even in stillness. I noticed the faint creases around his eyes, each line telling a story, a history I was only beginning to glimpse. My gaze drifted to the locket once more, the cool metal pressing gently against my chest, and I felt a wave of anticipation mixed with uncertainty. Every step I took seemed to echo slightly, a soft counterpoint to the racing rhythm of my heart. The city outside hummed faintly, a distant reminder of the world beyond this suite, a life that now felt remote and fragile. Vincent moved slightly, a subtle shift in stance, eyes tracking every nuance of my movements. The air between us was charged, heavy with unspoken truths, secrets waiting to be acknowledged. I reached for a small envelope on the desk, fingers curling around it, feeling its weight, the crisp paper hinting at something significant within. As I carefully opened it, a photograph slipped out, catching the chandelier light, and I froze, recognizing a faint, familiar detail that sent a shiver down my spine. Vincent stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the desk, his gaze fixed intently on my reaction, waiting, observing, assessing. I held the photograph in my hands, trembling slightly, realizing it connected pieces of a story I had never fully understood, threads of a past entwined with the man who now stood silently before me. The room seemed to shrink around us, every surface reflecting the tension, the soft flicker of candlelight dancing across polished marble and velvet drapes, creating shifting shadows that mirrored the uncertainty of the moment. My pulse quickened, breaths coming in shallow, measured pulls, each inhale drawing me deeper into the gravity of the situation, each exhale a reminder of the fragile control I still maintained. Vincent inclined his head slightly, a subtle but deliberate movement, acknowledging the significance of what I held without a word, the quiet communication between us laden with weight, history, and anticipation. I could feel the energy in the room shift, a delicate balance between revelation and restraint, and I understood that this photograph, this single artifact, was a key to understanding the intricate web of past events, decisions, and hidden truths that had led us both to this exact moment. My hands trembled, but I steadied them, placing the photograph carefully back on the desk, and looked up to meet his gaze fully, the intensity in his eyes reflecting a depth of knowledge, a lifetime of experience, and the subtle promise that not all secrets were yet revealed. The chandelier light caught his sharp features, casting a pattern of light and shadow that seemed to trace the contours of his history across the room, and in that moment, I felt both the weight and the pull of destiny, an invisible thread connecting us through time, circumstance, and the fragile, complex bond that had begun to form between Emily Carter and Vincent Romano. The soft click of the locket opening broke the silence in the suite, and I held it carefully in my palms, tracing the delicate engraving with my fingertips, feeling the cool metal against my skin. Vincent remained near the fireplace, his posture relaxed yet commanding, a presence that seemed to anchor the room despite the tension that pulsed between us. The chandelier above threw fractured light across the polished marble floor, casting patterns that danced like whispers of past and present intertwined. I took a slow breath, steadying my racing heart, and noticed the faint lines of experience etched into his face, subtle yet telling, the shadows highlighting the depth of his gaze. My eyes followed his every movement as he stepped closer, deliberate, measured, his suit brushing softly against the carpet with each footfall, the faint scent of cedar and something darker lingering in the air. The city below hummed softly, distant yet insistent, a reminder that life carried on outside these walls, while within, a delicate balance of power, secrecy, and curiosity held sway. I shifted slightly, feeling the weight of anticipation, the locket pressing gently against my chest as though it, too, were aware of the unfolding moment. Vincent inclined his head, observing, waiting for my reaction, and I felt a subtle thrill, an awareness of the unspoken dialogue passing silently between us. I placed the locket back against the small velvet box on the desk, its surface catching the light, reflecting the intricate patterns of shadow and illumination that filled the room. His eyes never left mine, and I could feel the gravity of his attention, the careful calculation, the quiet assertion of presence that demanded recognition. I stepped back slightly, allowing the space between us to become charged with anticipation, each movement deliberate, measured, a part of a larger rhythm that neither of us fully articulated but both understood instinctively. The soft hum of the city, the subtle shifting of candlelight, the faint creak of the floorboards all seemed amplified, each element a note in the silent symphony of the night. I reached for the edge of the armchair, fingers grazing the velvet, grounding myself, yet my thoughts raced, connecting fragments of past knowledge, fleeting impressions, and the subtle indications of a history I had only begun to unravel. Vincent tilted his head, a motion slight but deliberate, his eyes narrowing in recognition, acknowledgment, and something that hinted at a story untold. I took another breath, steady, measured, feeling the room tighten and expand around us, the interplay of anticipation and discovery weaving an invisible thread that connected our movements, our glances, and the weight of the locket against my chest. In that delicate pause, I understood that the night was far from over, that each gesture, each subtle shift of light or sound, carried the potential to reveal truths, bind moments together, and guide the unfolding narrative that neither of us could yet fully predict, a moment suspended between revelation and restraint, curiosity and anticipation, as Emily Carter and Vincent Romano moved through the first hours of a night that promised to shape everything that followed. The room felt smaller now, the shadows stretching across the polished marble as the candlelight flickered gently against the walls, casting a warm, golden hue that softened the sharp edges of the suite. I stepped closer to the desk once more, running my fingers over the scattered papers, photographs, and letters that seemed to tell fragments of a story I was only beginning to understand. Vincent remained near the fireplace, still and commanding, his presence filling every corner without a word, his dark eyes fixed on me with a steady intensity that made my pulse quicken. I picked up a photograph, the edges worn, the image faintly familiar, and felt a shiver run through me as recognition sparked. The chandelier above cast fractured light across the floor, highlighting the contours of the furniture and the slight creases in his suit, details I could not ignore even as my mind raced to connect past and present. I placed the photograph back carefully, mindful of the delicate surface of the desk, and turned slowly to face him, the warmth from the fireplace brushing against my skin, a subtle reminder of the life in the room beyond the shadows and mysteries. He shifted slightly, the movement deliberate, measured, drawing my attention to the faint glint of a ring on his hand, the careful positioning of his stance, the quiet assertion of authority that seemed to define every motion. I took a breath, steadying the rapid rhythm of my heartbeat, and felt the subtle tension that lingered in the space between us, a thread woven from curiosity, anticipation, and the unspoken acknowledgment of truths yet to be revealed. The locket against my chest pressed gently, a tangible connection to a history I had barely begun to grasp, and I traced its surface absently as I considered the implications of the photograph, the letters, and the shadows that hinted at more than what met the eye. Vincent's gaze remained unyielding, following my every movement with the quiet patience of someone accustomed to control, yet with an undercurrent of curiosity that mirrored my own, a shared awareness of the significance of this night and the revelations that would unfold in the hours to come. I stepped closer to the window, letting my hand hover over the cool glass, feeling the faint vibration of the city below, distant yet insistent, a reminder that the world continued beyond this room even as I navigated the intricate web of observation, recognition, and discovery that defined our first night together. Each breath I drew seemed to carry both tension and clarity, each subtle movement a dance of caution and understanding, and I felt a tentative connection forming, fragile yet undeniable, as the candlelight flickered over the polished surfaces, the chandelier casting fractured prisms across the floor, and the room held us suspended in a delicate balance of curiosity, revelation, and the quiet power that Vincent Romano commanded simply by being present, a presence that both intimidated and intrigued, compelling me to remain fully alert, fully aware, and yet captivated by the unfolding narrative that was only just beginning to reveal itself to Emily Carter. The soft flicker of candlelight played across the polished marble floor as I moved toward the center of the suite, each step measured, deliberate, and yet weighed down by the anticipation that seemed to thrum in the very air around me. Vincent remained near the fireplace, his posture calm but commanding, every detail of his presence radiating authority and control, drawing my attention in ways that I could not ignore. The city lights beyond the tall windows shimmered faintly, a distant pulse reminding me of the life outside, yet the suite felt like a world unto itself, suspended in time, governed by the quiet rhythm of observation and discovery. I held the locket lightly in my hand, its surface smooth, cool against my skin, and I felt a subtle thrill at the recognition I glimpsed in Vincent's eyes, a spark of understanding that seemed to bridge the gap between past and present. He stepped closer, deliberate, measured, yet without breaking the space between us, his dark eyes tracing my movements, reading the tension in my shoulders, the slight tremble in my fingers, the way I shifted my weight from one foot to another. I placed the locket carefully back on the desk, tracing its outline with a fingertip, and felt the weight of curiosity and expectation pressing around me, the room shrinking and expanding with the rhythm of our silent exchange. The chandelier overhead fractured the light into scattered patterns, casting a lattice of shadows and illumination that mirrored the complexity of the unfolding night, and I realized that every glance, every small movement carried significance, the air thick with unspoken questions and tentative acknowledgments. Vincent inclined his head slightly, a gesture subtle yet deliberate, and I sensed the weight of history and unspoken truths behind that controlled, measured presence, the quiet insistence of someone who understood the power of observation, the strength of restraint, and the gravity of what was to come. I moved toward the windows, fingers brushing the cool glass, feeling the faint vibration of the city below, each pulse of light reflecting in my eyes as though carrying messages from a past I was only beginning to understand. The suite seemed to contract, the candlelight flickering over polished surfaces, casting reflections and shadows that danced across the walls, the desk, and the fireplace, each element contributing to the delicate tension that hung between us. I took a steadying breath, exhaling slowly, feeling the pulse of anticipation in my chest, knowing that the night was far from over, that every detail, every gesture, and every glance was a step in the intricate dance of discovery, understanding, and connection that bound us, a thread of curiosity, revelation, and quiet fascination stretching between Emily Carter and Vincent Romano as we navigated the fragile, suspended reality of the hours unfolding before us, each moment holding the promise of truth, clarity, and a deeper comprehension of the past and its impact on the life we were beginning to share. The photograph on the desk caught my eye again, the soft glow of the chandelier reflecting off its surface, highlighting the faint, familiar detail that had first drawn my attention. I lifted it gently, feeling the slight weight and texture between my fingers, and a wave of realization rippled through me as recognition settled in. Vincent remained near the fireplace, arms crossed loosely, his gaze steady, unwavering, yet softened by a subtle acknowledgment of the connection forming between past and present. The room seemed to hold its breath as I traced the edges of the photograph, memories intertwining with curiosity, anticipation, and a cautious understanding of what it implied. Each flicker of candlelight cast shifting shadows across the polished marble floor, creating a moving tapestry that mirrored the dance of emotions swirling inside me. I turned slowly, meeting Vincent's eyes fully, noticing the faint creases at the corners, the quiet depth that spoke of experience, patience, and restraint, and I felt a pulse of respect and fascination ripple through me. My fingers lingered on the locket, tracing its engraved surface, the cool metal grounding me as I considered the implications, the threads of history connecting us in ways I had only begun to comprehend. Vincent stepped closer, deliberate yet careful, maintaining the space between us while allowing the quiet intensity to linger, a shared understanding passing in unspoken words, glances, and subtle movements. The city beyond the tall window shimmered faintly, distant but insistent, a reminder of the world outside, while within, every detail, the polished desk, the photographs, the flickering candlelight, carried weight, significance, and the quiet promise of revelation. I felt a steady rhythm in my chest, each breath measured, aligning with the delicate cadence of observation, anticipation, and discovery that defined this night. Vincent inclined his head slightly, an acknowledgment of my realization, a quiet signal that the moment was significant, that the path of understanding had begun to unfold. I placed the photograph back on the desk with care, adjusting its position so that the light caught it just right, and stepped toward the window, letting the faint vibration of the city below remind me of the life that continued beyond these walls. Every detail, every flicker of shadow and light, every movement between us carried meaning, a delicate interplay of revelation, curiosity, and restraint, weaving a thread that connected Emily Carter to Vincent Romano in a web of history, understanding, and the subtle unfolding of truths that would shape the hours and days ahead. In that stillness, I understood that the night was not merely a passage of time but a carefully orchestrated space for discovery, reflection, and the quiet acknowledgement of secrets, anticipation, and the promise of clarity waiting just beyond the next moment, a realization that left me both captivated and alert as the unfolding story continued to reveal itself with careful, deliberate precision. The suite seemed suspended in time, the soft glow from the chandelier casting long, dancing shadows across the marble floor, highlighting every subtle contour of the furniture and the polished surfaces around us. I stood near the window, fingers brushing the cool glass, the city lights below twinkling faintly, distant but insistent, a reminder of a life continuing outside these walls while inside, everything felt contained, deliberate, and charged with anticipation. Vincent remained by the fireplace, his presence steady, commanding, yet tempered by the quiet patience of a man accustomed to careful observation. His dark eyes followed my every movement, noting the slight shift in my posture, the gentle tremble in my fingers as I traced the locket once more, and the faint catch of my breath as understanding began to bloom. I turned slowly, meeting his gaze, and in that moment, the room seemed to contract around us, the air thick with unspoken acknowledgments, the subtle weight of history, and the quiet anticipation of revelation. The photograph on the desk caught my attention again, its edges illuminated by the chandelier, and I felt the pull of curiosity, the delicate intertwining of past and present that bound us in this suspended reality. Vincent stepped closer, measured and deliberate, the faint rustle of his suit brushing against the carpet, his presence filling the space without overwhelming, commanding attention through stillness rather than movement. I inhaled slowly, letting the rhythm of my breath steady the pulse racing in my chest, and as I placed the photograph gently back on the desk, I felt the weight of the night settle around us, a blend of clarity, anticipation, and the soft hum of connection that had begun to form between us. The locket warmed under my fingertips, a tangible reminder of the threads connecting history and present, a small anchor grounding me amidst the unfolding revelations. I glanced toward Vincent, catching the subtle lines of contemplation etched on his face, the quiet intensity of his gaze, and I understood that what lay ahead would require patience, attention, and a willingness to navigate the delicate balance of discovery and restraint. The soft candlelight flickered, casting gentle reflections across the room, highlighting the deliberate calm in his movements and the quiet understanding in my own, as though the space itself recognized the significance of this night. I drew another steady breath, feeling the pulse of anticipation in the room, the careful dance of revelation and comprehension, the unspoken promise that each moment held meaning beyond what was immediately visible. In that stillness, I sensed the threads of our shared history intertwining with the possibilities of the night, the weight of secrets beginning to yield to recognition and understanding, and the subtle but undeniable shift in the air that marked the start of something both profound and quietly transformative. Emily Carter and Vincent Romano stood in measured proximity, their movements and glances weaving a tapestry of suspense, curiosity, and insight, the suite holding its breath as the first night of discovery reached a poised, anticipatory edge, every flicker of light, every shadow, every subtle motion carrying the unspoken message that the story between us had only just begun, and that the hours ahead would reveal more, layer by layer, until clarity, understanding, and the intricate depth of connection unfolded completely.